Okay, so I have copied the code from the R Markdown document and of the next set of examples. And here what I'm going to show you is I'm going to first go through the user interface and then I'll go through the server calculations. And remember, what we're trying to show is reactive expressions. Okay, so again, we have our library Shiny statement right there. Okay, we have Shiny UI, fluid page, we've got a title, okay, and then we're going to have a sidebar layout with this. Okay, so that's this right here, which is, and then that contains the sidebar panel, these commands right here, and the main panel, these commands right here. So the sidebar panel is going to contain the inputs, and the main panel is going to contain the outputs. So the sidebar panel includes a slider input, okay, and remember what that's going to be labeled as is slider MPG. So we're inputting the miles per gallon from the car, and then these checkbox are going to tell whether or not you want to show certain model values, okay, in the output in the main panel, okay, and then we give it the default value of 20 and a range from 10 miles per gallon to 35 miles per gallon. And the goal is to create something that then displays your prediction for the horsepower. Okay, then in the main panel, okay, oh, and just by the way, the inputs are show model 1 and show model 2. Okay. The main panel then is going to show the output, plot 1. So we're going to look in our server function for a plot labeled plot 1 to make sure that it's there, because it's going to get displayed here in our main panel. Then we're going to have our output from prediction 1, and that's going to be labeled pred 1. So we need some sort of output from our server that is going to be labeled pred 1, and another one that's labeled pred 2, that are both going to be text output. Okay, so that's what our user interface is doing. It's getting a slider input to get in miles per gallon. That slider's label is slider MPG. It's going to have the two checkboxes for whether or not it's going to show that particular model output. Okay, so that's what it's going to send to the server. Okay, those are some information that's going to be sent to the server as input. And what we're expecting from our server functions as output is we're expecting a plot labeled plot 1. We're expecting text labeled pred 1 and text labeled pred 2. Okay, now let's look at our server. So here's our Shiny server function, and then it contains this function that contains input and output. Okay, first thing it looks for, or first thing it's going to do is it's going to take the empty cars data set, which is loaded by default. So if I just type empty cars, then you can just see the data set. It's loaded by default. It's one of the more common example data sets used in R. And it's basically going to create, this is just a spline term. So if the miles per gallon of the car is larger than 20, this is going to return the miles per gallon. Otherwise, it's going to return 0. And that's useful if you want to fit a model that has a kind of a broken stick fit. So it has a line and then a breakpoint at 20 and then another line, and the two lines meet continuously at that breakpoint. So then what's going on in the code is it's fitting this first model that just has miles per gallon, and the second model that has miles per gallon, and this breakpoint in the middle. Okay? So it's fitting two models, and these two models are what's going to be used to form the prediction. Okay, now let's actually get the prediction for model 1. Okay, now we're doing calculations based on inputted values from our user interface, so it needs to be in a reactive statement. So here we see this reactive statement. We see this funny notation where we have a parentheses and a curly braces. Okay, and then we're going to relabel the input just as a regular R variable, because it gets annoying to type input $ so often. Okay, so we have miles per gallon input is just the input $ slider MPG. And remember, slider MPG is what we named the slider value in our user interface. Okay, and then this predict statement is just going to use model 1. Okay, so it uses model 1. You can see it right there. Uses model 1, and it's going to predict it at the new value input from the slider. Okay, so that's model 1. And then model 2 is going to do the same thing, with the exception that we have to also create this variable. If our input value is bigger than 20, it returns that. Otherwise, it's going to return 0. So it's the same thing, only now we've created this second variable, mpgsp, right? And that's this extra spline term. And then it's going to, so we have our two reactive assigned variables, model 1 pred and model 2 pred. Okay, now the first output that we're going to create is output $plot1. Remember that our user interface is looking for a plot labeled plot1. And because it's a plot, we're going to say it's a render plot, okay? And that funny notation where it's a the parentheses, then the curly braces inside the parentheses. Okay, so we're grabbing our miles per gallon input. That's just the slider miles per gallon again. Okay, and then we're going to create a plot. Okay, and the plot, you can just, you're all familiar with R plotting, so you can just go through and see how the plot's working. But then also, what I would like you to look for, first right here, if show model 1, then it's adding this, it's adding the fit for the model 1. And if show model 2, it's going to add the fit for model 2. Okay, so that's one thing. It has these conditional values for whether or not those lines are going to be in there. Okay, it's got a nice legend. Okay, and then if you look down here, this is the most important part I want to show, is we want to add some points at the miles per gallon that you input. That's this value right here. Remember, we reassigned that from the slider value up here, right? So we just renamed it from the input $slider MPG, okay? But then also we want the result of our reactive expression, model 1 pred. And so we're putting that in there, but remember, you got to access that number as a function, right? Because it was from a reactive expression otherwhere in the code, okay? So it's got to be, so this will just return the number, okay? If you don't actually put those parentheses there, it'll return the function, which points won't know what to plot because it's a function. So if you wanted to put that in the number, you have to put the parentheses there, okay? And then here's the second one. Okay, so these will add the points. Okay, so the output of this is going to be a plot that's going to be passed back to our user interface. It's going to have, if the check boxes are checked, it's going to have the two fitted lines. It's going to have the data it's using to fit those lines on there, but then it's also going to have specific points at our two prediction values. Okay, great. And then it's also, remember, it's looking for a pred1. In other words, it wants to see the prediction. And so we're going to do that, and that needs to be text, so it's going to be render text, and then model 1 pred, and then we're going to do pred 2, okay? And that's render text again, and model 2 pred. And remember, in both cases, we're doing remembering to do the parentheses for our reactive expressions. Okay, now let's go ahead and run it and see how it works. And there it is. Okay, so here's our slider. As we change our slider, what you're going to see is the 2 points, the points where we're predicting at. And you can see the two models here, right? The red one, which had no spline term, and the blue one, which had this spline term at 20. So you see it looks like a little broken stick. So our two models. And then down here, we see the prediction from model 1 and the prediction from model 2. So exactly as we were hoping it would work, okay? And then you can show or hide the first line or show or hide the second line. Okay? So now we're getting at, I think now, once you recreate this example, I think you'll be at the point where you can actually do some fairly complicated things in Shiny, and it's an incredibly useful tool. Next, what we're going to want to go through is just showing how to put conditional expressions where you'll operate on the code conditionally upon clicking a done button or something like this. But at this point, I think you should probably be able to make Shiny pretty useful for you. So go ahead and try this example, and I think after the next lecture, you'll be have a pretty solid foundation for working on your Shiny apps and creating things that are quite useful for you, and then of course useful for others when you put them on the internet.